are the only folks keeping the barbarians from the gate.
I got into the labor movement not because I wanted to negotiate wages. I got into the labor movement because I saw it as a vehicle to do massive social change to improve the lots of people.
Let's take these son of a out and give America back to America where we belong. Thank you very much. Thank you.
As far as I'm concerned, the Tea Party can go straight to hell. I am a real American. Fight for the rights of every man. I am a real American. Fight for what's right. Fight for your life.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Brian Summerfield. He is Trucker Randy, and we are your defending fathers. Been all over the debate that happened yesterday, the U.S. Senate debate, and we've got Judge Randy Heckman on the line. I'm Brian Summerfield. He's Trucker Randy, and welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you so much. Good to be with you.
Good morning, Randy.
Hey, good morning, Trucker Randy.
The debate happened yesterday, and I watched the whole half hour earlier today. And, I kind of felt sorry for you. You almost seemed like Ron Paul at one of the presidential debates where the other two were going at it, and it's like, oh, yeah, Judge Heckman, please, your response.
Well, they had a guy keeping track of how much time each of the three of us were speaking and tried to, they were feeding information to Tim to say, hey, you got to give Heckman a little more time. He's been too quiet. So they tried to be as equal across the board as they could, but good old Mr. Durant came in early with his charge against Pete, and so they were going back and forth to the point where it was, in my opinion, it was obnoxious. I'm sorry, and I just called a timeout and said, "Wait a minute, guys. This is like being in a rowboat fighting each other, but going over Niagara Falls. We gotta at some point, again, we're gonna disagree, but we got to work together. We got to fix this thing. We're all going to go over the cliff. We're all going to run into the iceberg. And so at some point, you got to quit the rhetoric and you got to roll up your sleeves and get to work.
One of the questions I had for you, Randy, in looking at the way that debate was set up, no rules according to the PR that Skubik's people put out there.
Right.
And Brian, who did listen to it, I haven't listened to it yet. I've been a little busy. I'm up in Escanaba this morning. And one of the questions that came to my mind to ask you specifically, because, so much focus has been on Hoekstra and Durant fighting it out, attacking each other back and forth. You running your campaign from the beginning had a very specific message, and I'm going to let you talk about that in a second. But my question specifically was about this debate. I was really surprised that according to all these polls, we're all being told by the media and by the Democrats and everybody that Hoekstra's, way out in front, and don't even bother voting on Tuesday, that's game over. Why do you think Pete Hoekstra agreed to a last-minute debate?
I'm thinking, and this is just my assumption. I was reading some of the body language and a little bit of the talk before and after the program between Pete and Tim Skubik, and I think what would have happened, I think we were going to have a debate even if Hoekstra was not there, to be very honest with you. And he was going to therefore give a free pass to Clark and myself, to kind of speak and have an empty chair for Pete. So Pete agreed to 30 minutes, and at one point I said, boy, it would have been nice if this was an hour long. And that's when Tim and Pete exchanged a little bit of conversation that said to me that this was the most that Tim was going to get out of Pete, to be honest with you. But that surprised me as well, that Pete agreed to it. But I think the alternative was going to be, we're going to have a program, Pete's not going to be there, giving Clark full reign to say what he wanted to say.
The overall, though, again, I could just take a look at this debate and see that that you were really unable to get your message out. And you're right, you were able to make 2 points, and one of them was the one about, we're sitting there worrying about water coming into the boat, and the boat's going over the rapids. What message would you really have liked to had made if you were given enough time to really make it yesterday?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Brian. And again, the message that we have been saying all along is that there is not a purely political solution to the problems that face us. That the problems in Washington are symptoms of the problem and need to be addressed. I mean, if we don't address the growing debt in our country and all that leads to it, I mean, we really are heading to disaster. All the economists in Washington, the leading ones, say that we are heading to what they call the drop-dead date. That's the date when all the tax receipts that come into Washington only pay for the interest on our debt. And the conservatives who feel, and I think they're right, to say that the interest rates have got to start climbing. I mean, the Federal Reserve has artificially held interest rates low. That cannot go on indefinitely. That as interest rates begin to climb back to the more normal 5 or 6%, at $17 trillion, which is where it's going to be soon, we're talking $1 trillion a year just in interest payments. And that is unsustainable. And that is the time when we begin to just crumble. We'll make Greece and Spain just look like a walk in the park compared to what's going to happen over here. So we need to begin to turn this ship now. But my point that I've been making consistently is that the government we have in Washington is pretty much the government that much of America wants. Half of Americans pay no income tax, get major benefits. Large corporations, according to Senator Jim DeMint, as quoted in the Wall Street Journal a few weeks ago, virtually all the large corporations have their nose in the federal trough because of their lobbyists and their actions in Washington. The back of our country our country is largely being carried on the backs of small and medium-sized businesses in our country who are under a greater and greater load from the regulations and the tax uncertainties and everything else, but they're barely able to carry our country. And so, my point is that the large corporations and the people that are paying no taxes in our country want the government we have. And for you simply to go to Washington and say, hey, we're just going to do in Washington what we did in Michigan, we're just going to vote, we're going to change this thing, everything's going to be fine, you and what army are going to make that happen? You know, the Republicans in Michigan did a great job over the last few years to turn things around, but the per capita debt in Michigan, the Michigan debt is $2,000 per man, woman, and children. I mean, it's a lot of money. But the federal debt per capita, and this is just the debt that's on the balance sheet, is $50,000 per man, woman, and child. And we're talking about a major thing that's got to change. So you need buy-in from the American people. How in the world are you going to get buy-in from people that are getting major benefits without heart change? So that real leadership understands that you have to wage this war, certainly in Washington. We've got to work our tail off to make changes there, to build coalitions, to make changes and do what it takes. But you also have to speak to the hearts of Americans. And to do that most effectively, looking at our history, what's worked is for a moral and spiritual awakening. That changed England back 200 years ago, so they'd eliminate the slave trade. That worked near the Civil War to begin to eliminate slavery in this country. We need it again. I don't see an alternative. So bottom line is I'm not taking PAC money from people that have a financial interest. I feel that's a bribe. If you pay me money for my campaign so that I will negotiate with the government to give you or your client money, to me that's a bribe. Call it what you want it, it's a bribe. I'm not doing it. But we have formed what we call a Healing America Pact, PACT. We're asking people to commit to daily pray for awakening in America. Ask God what does He want me to do, each one of us, and it may be political, it may be whatever, helping a neighbor, mentoring somebody, whatever it is, some selfless act that you can do on a regular basis. C, courageously obey. T, together. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Independent, Republican, we're Americans. We're all on this ship. We're heading to the iceberg. We got to do our part, and we got to work together. If we disagree, let's at least not hate each other in that process.
I think the point that you made at the very beginning of that is something that, again, illustrates what is wrong with Washington. 2 years ago, there was legislation that came out. They were all concerned about credit cards. And they were saying, we need to make sure that you're not getting all of these these things in the mail that say, free credit, get this credit card here, let's credit card surf, let's make sure we put the rein in on this unrestrained credit and credit surfing that American people are doing.
Right.
And in one of the things that they needed to make sure that they put on the bills, here's how long it's going to take for you to pay off this debt at your minimum payments.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what you were just saying. At what point are we going to have where every dollar of tax is going to pay debt? We need to have them on our tax returns print on there. Here's how long it's going to take to pay the debt off with your dollars at the minimum amount. If you are an elected politician sending out campaign literature or franking with saying, here's what we've done, make them put boldly at the top, here's how long it's going to take for you to pay off the debt with our reckless spending.
Yeah. To me, and I'm going to put a video up, I think, today. You reminded me of it. I've had it available. I just haven't made it public yet. I think I'll throw it up. And basically my thought is, I'm going to go beyond. I'm going to go beyond what you just said. Besides just putting truth in lending, as it were, of the federal government. I mean, we pay. You can look at our Constitution to say that one of the things under Article 1, Section 8 is that our Congress is to pay the debts of the American people. Okay, pay the debts. And there's another provision that says that they're to be paid as long as they do what they're supposed to do. And I could pull that out from my Constitution. They're not paying the debts. They're not doing their job. So we can make the argument that if you don't do the job, I mean, if I get somebody to come and put a new roof on my house, I pay them when they actually put the roof on my house. If it still leaks, I don't pay them. We pay our congressmen $170-some thousand a year to do the job for us. One of those jobs is to pay the bills. They're not doing it. So I say that we cut their pay, cut it in half, or completely cut their pay when they don't balance the budget. I wonder how quickly, if we actually put that into legislation, how quickly we would finally get them to do their job. Oh, that's just so frustrating to the American people that we pay these inordinate amounts of money, not just for the legislators, but then their staff. Each staff, Debbie Stabenow's staff, costs us $3 million a year, not to mention the cost for electricity and heat and everything else for all the offices she has everywhere. Again, I'm happy to pay her if she'll do her job.
Well, they haven't passed the budget, Randy, in the Senate, going on over 3 years, 3.5 years. And
she's on the budget.
You make a very good point.
Yeah.
No pay for unless they pass a budget that is balanced.
Exactly.
Okay, but here's the thing. How are you going to get them to vote for that bill?
Well, again, obviously you won't. I mean, obviously it will be very challenging, but you can still say, look, this is what we need to do. I mean, here we are, we three guys. Can you imagine? Can you imagine applying for a job in an organization where your customers give it a 91% unfavorable rating? Can you imagine applying for working anywhere like that? And I've been working at this thing for 16 months. But it has such a low opinion. People have such a low opinion of Congress because we're not doing the job there, because we're just fighting each other. We're consuming incredible amounts of resources, and we're not solving the problem. And, insider trading. Martha Stewart goes off to prison for insider trading. Congressmen have just been getting rich. And, the incestuous relationship between lobbyists and corporations and legislators. And it's just, we have to lead. Leadership leads by example. And that's why I'm not taking PAC money. That is why I'm engaging this campaign without personally attacking anyone. I am promoting what we need to do. And again, it's what I'm doing is foolish from a human point of view. If you want to win a campaign, you ring the bell of your opponent, you raise all kinds of money so that you can, just throw in as much mud at the guy as you can. I'm not going to do that, because if I can't do it with a clear conscience and in a way that builds our country, I'm just not going to do it. I don't have to win this thing to be okay.
Well, here's a point that you made on that exactly. One of the men that's on the ballot dropped out of the race, Gary Glenn, because he wasn't able to raise enough money to get his message out.
Right.
Very, very similar, Randy, to what you're trying to do. But he saw the writing on the wall. He dropped out. He endorsed another candidate. And my question to you is very specifically, if you're not able to get your message out, as you said, humanly, it's not the way to run a campaign, but you're relying on a higher power to get the message out and to get people to spread the word for you.
Yeah.
That we're recording this. This is going to be blasted all over Facebook tonight when we get this uploaded with our engineer. I'm going to post it on your page, and feel free to spread it far and wide. We will too. But my question specifically is this. We're 5 days away. Tuesday's the election. If, because you don't have the money raised like Gary Glenn didn't have, and you're not able to actually win this thing, if, let's say, God falls short in providing your victory on what you're relying on Him to do, we've all prayed about it, we've talked about this, you and I have had discussions about it. One of the components to this, and I'm sorry, Randy, but I've got to bring it up. The Lord is asking me to ask you this question. Pete Hoekstra told you he was not going to get into this race. He said he was not going to do it. He lost for governor in 2010. He considered you a personal, longtime friend. You told him that you heard a calling. You felt the Lord was calling you to do this to save our country. Shortly thereafter, he announced, because he told you, the party called and said, Pete, you're our guy. You got to get into this thing. My question to you is, you're going to pull some of his supporters' votes in your district because you guys live in the same district together. A lot of people on the west side of the state of Michigan love both of you, and probably, you'll probably split the vote, I think, 50-50 in his home district. If that's not enough to put you over the top, do you think you'll actually possibly hurt Pete enough that Clark Durant may actually win this thing?
I have no clue. I mean, I have no idea. I mean, the polls have been all across the map. Some have me in second place. Some have me in a distant third. I do not have the funds to be able to do my own polling, so I'm not doing it. I'm just speaking my word. I know that I've influenced people like Clark Durant. He's told me that directly. I influenced the discussion at the debate yesterday. I mean, I know I have, because we talked about the call of God, to do what we're going to do. So I really do not know about that. I just know that we have ardent supporters across the state of Michigan. A big unknown, to be honest with you, Randy, is voter turnout next Tuesday. You know, some people just say, I do not sense, as we've talked to people, great motivation on people's part to vote for Pete Hoekstra, for example. I mean, I think a lot of people know his name. It's the best known name across the state because he has run statewide before. But as far as actual people being motivated to say he's our man, we just haven't seen a lot of people with that kind of motivation. I do know that there's a lot of motivated people, by the grace of God, for the message that we've been speaking. And we'll just have to see what voter turnout is and what the results are.
I'm going to go into that message a little bit because I think it's important. It's really been the basis of your campaign. Mm-hmm. I talked about it at length a couple days ago because, I think we'll agree on this. Just the verbiage will be a little bit different. But I'll tell you what I said the other day is that our nation suffers from a sin problem.
Yeah.
And that has really affected what our nation has been able to do. In your message, really, the contrast from other candidates is they've really gotten into deep issues. Your main message has been, hey, look, we are a Judeo-Christian nation. Again, going back to your judge days, saying that, our laws are based on Judeo-Christian values. Going back to your background as a pastor, here's where we've gotten away from those values, and it's affected our nation. We need to heal ourselves as a nation before we can really go forward, and that has been really the root of your message from day one.
Oh, and it's true. I mean, I wrote a book, just a Truth That Sets America Free. And I say, why in the world did 5% of the world's population grow to become the richest and most powerful nation in the history of the world in 200 years? It wasn't because of natural resources. It wasn't because of the heritage of our people. It was because of ideas. It was because of the ideas that our nation allowed freedom to self-governing, virtuous citizens who use their God-given ability to create wealth and all that we have. I mean, it's just an incredible system. It's amazing that our framers came up with what they did. That was a blessing and providence of God, and we have lost that bubble, if you will. We have lost that understanding of how truth sets free, and we've gone to different systems. See, all laws are a reflection of someone's sense of morality, and all systems of morality are ultimately have a foundation of a world view. And as you pointed out, Brian, the worldview that shaped America was the Judeo-Christian tradition. And it works because it's consistent with the way that God created and wired the universe. That's why it works. It's consistent with the operating instructions of this world. You don't have to be a Christian or a Jew. You don't have to embrace the faith to at least pragmatically just say, you know what? It works. And the basic rule of life is if it works, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, we keep trying other methods. We tried other worldviews, environmentalism, secular humanism. There's a whole movement to get Sharia law and Islamic-type law to undergird some of our legal system. And look across the world to see where those other systems have been applied. See if you'd like to live in those nations. We've given more religious liberty in America than in any other nation in the history of the world because it's Judeo-Christian, where Christ would say, even love your enemies. And so it's just been an amazing, not perfect, but an amazing experiment that has worked. And I want to go back to it. We can go back to it. My sense is that God is reaching out in mercy to our country again to say, you can do this, but we need leaders that have the guts to speak what I'm saying. It's very politically incorrect to say what I'm saying. I don't care. We need to say this because it's true and because it will bring blessing again to our nation.
Randy, before we end up this interview at the bottom of the hour with you, what would you say to those listening and hearing this podcast later today online? What would you say to the voters of Michigan that are going to come out on Tuesday as your last-ditch effort or plea to have them vote for you?
Well, I appreciate the question. I would just say, look, if you want somebody who has a history of going to various organizations and praying about, the wise way to approach them and fix them. I did that at age 27 with a court that was totally opposed to what I wanted to do, and over time they changed in different organizations. If you want somebody that has that heart, that wants to go to Washington, as painful and hard as it's going to be, and work to make changes there, and use every ability he has and the prayer of many people to wisely move into that, but also travel the country as I have time and opportunity to speak to any group that is able to listen and willing to listen about heart change, about returning us to moral and spiritual renewal, of going back, putting God back in the middle of our country instead of government, then I'm your man. And I ask for your vote next week, Tuesday.
Well, Randy, I met your wife for the first time at a Sheboygan Tea Party almost 2 years ago. I'm sorry, Republican Lincoln Day dinner almost 2 years ago. And shortly after that, met you. And you both are tremendous people. And to have the caliber of both of you out on the campaign trail is truly refreshing. And again, win or lose on Tuesday, thank you for running.
Oh,
and
you're so kind. Did you see her video, by the way?
Yes, I did.
I encourage people to see Marcia's video. It now has over 1,800 hits. And it's 9 minutes long, but people have waded through that. It really brings me to tears every time I watch it. It's on our website. It's called My Tribute, Sweeter by the Dozen. It talks about our 12 kids and me.
Yeah, and thank you for joining us on Your Defending Fathers. We look to talk to you sometime in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
God bless you.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you.
See you, Randy. Bye.
Judge Heckman, Randy Heckman, he is running for the U.S. Senate race in the primary coming up. Vote on this Tuesday. good interview. I think you learned more about him again in this half hour than what you will on the debate. Really saw what is in his heart and what he's about. Really appreciate him joining us on the show. I'm Brian Summerfield. He is Trucker Randy, and we are your defending fathers.
This is the Patriot Voice Radio Network.